And so I remember pushing myself back from this table, my drawing table, and I said out loud, I said, "Bob Peak couldn't do this."
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the Michael Spooner here joining me for this interview. One of the things I want to do in these talks is I think it's important to share the knowledge and experience and superpowers that individual artists have. And in this case here, I have known Michael Spooner for several years now. Actually, we go pretty far back. We were first in communication with each other going back, I would say to maybe 2000 or 1995 or 1999, somewhere around there when we were working on dinosaurs. That's the first time I
Yeah,
had a
yeah,
chance to talk to you. And then since then, we've been in contact with one another. We've worked together. And I absolutely love this man. Is my brother in Christ, and
yeah.
so my one of my dear friends. I Michael Spooner, welcome.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you, Marcelo.
I
And
want to, your superpower. Your superpower is experience that you started, like you finished Art Center in 1976 and started working professionally.
75, 75,
75, even more so.
75. When it
That
was in, well, it was still in the last semester, it was on 3rd Street in LA. Then it moved to Pasadena above the Rose Bowl.
And so that
Eh,
means, Michael, that is almost 50 years.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
50 years of experience. It's absolutely wonderful. It's
Amazing.
funny because some people you know, they they work in the industry for a few years and they simply get out. And then here you've been able to make a tremendous career working at all of these different studios at all these different times, because there were different eras in
Yeah.
animation. There was the pre-Roger Rabbit animation. There's the
Mhm.
post-Roger Rabbit animation, and then there's the post 2D animation when they go into CG animation. So it really,
Correct.
you have this tremendous span in your career.
Yeah. And I think it was during, generally, we got a real experience during a time when there wasn't that when there was an up peak in in animation, right? I mean, it was dead pretty much, other than some TV animation studios, Hanna Barbera, Filmation. But anyone that wanted to move into real serious animation, they just didn't have that availability because Disney was kind of like not going anywhere until Meisner stepped in and started, you know, reestablishing a good business approach to it. And Disney began to grow back and active. So it wasn't until those years that we were able to really have the opportunities, if you were ready for those, to even move into feature film,
Yeah.
because
And
there
you,
wasn't a lot. Warner Brothers feature wasn't around at that time. DreamWorks wasn't around, and Disney was about the only thing in town. you know, so no Sony Pictures,
no, and you were at the right
No
place at,
Skydance, nothing of that.
yeah, you were at
So
the right place at the right time.
yeah, of
I
course.
look here. So you've worked at Disney, you've worked at Pixar, you worked at Warner Brothers, you've worked at DreamWorks, you worked at Sony Pictures Animation, Big Idea, and Skydance. I mean, that is really amazing that the various studios.
Yeah.
Let's go back. I want to kind of move through this chronologically. Why don't we go back to your education, because this idea that you had, that you this artist that you want to build for yourself. So you weren't comfortable at the level of just being a layout artist and doing things. You were always looking to take a step up. You were always looking to take your artwork to the next level. I want to find out. I imagine that experience, those ideas started to form when you were in art school. So this would have been probably what, 1971 when you started
Yeah.
art school, all the way to about 1975. that
Mhm.
who were your teachers? What was your inspiration? Or even the mindset when you first went into school? Who did you think that you were going to become?
Well, I wanted to become better than what I was. I came from Michigan, and I'd already been in the Army. I was drafted when I was 19. Ended up because I'd lost my father when he was killed in a car accident when I was 5 years old, and I didn't have. I was the only male spooner in my family name, so the military would not put me in a combat zone. So thankfully, I did not go to Vietnam, and they sent me. Ultimately, they sent me. Well, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and became an illustrator on Infantry magazine. Then I had 1 year left of 2 year draft, and I came down in orders to go to Germany, and they said, well, we can keep you in stateside if you want. And I said, no, no, I want to get out of the country. I've never been out of the United States, and I've always wanted to go to Germany. I've always wanted to do the Rhine River tour and things like that. I was just a kid, you know. And so I had the opportunity. The editor of my magazine said, let me contact the editor in Heidelberg, Germany on Army in Europe magazine. And he did. He said, we're in luck. They're just losing their one and only illustrator. And so I came down in orders, went right to Germany. Within a week, I was in Heidelberg, and it was just this wonderful experience.
And then
Well,
where did this idea of animation sort of weave itself?
right. Well, yeah, yeah. I had no idea. I had no interest in animation. I had no clue to what it really was to the extent. Yeah, I saw it on television and all that. I grew up with, with a screen right there, 3 inches from my face, growing up on all the cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons. But um, if anything, if I became an illustrator, I wanted to be, an editorial illustrator. I wanted to live in outside of New York. All the classic illustrators of the time in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, you know, that was kind of my pipe dream. But that's only when I became interested in animation or illustration. I was, studying fine art, and it was in the middle 60s, and all my professors had beards, and I wanted a beard like them. I felt like if I had a beard, I would be an artist too. But all through school, art center, I had a beard, long hair. This was in the 70s. And so, like a lot of the students today, I basically like any other student. I'm not any different than they are. I'm just a country kid. I'm just a guy that, had to work hard. I'm just like you are. I'm just like you, other than the fact that I had long hair, a beard, and I wore bell-bottom jeans when I was your age. So, uh, so I came out of the army, studied another year in academics to get all of my academics out of the way for Art Center. I was accepted to Art Center actually before I went to the military. My professor, one of my art professors at Flint Community Junior College, and he said, "I think you would fit moving into illustration." And I remember saying that. I thought, "No, I want to be like you. I don't want to be a fine artist." He said, "I think you need to reconsider." He
You
said,
know,
"There's an outstanding."
that is important. There's an aspect which is well, sometimes as artists or as students that we can't see ourselves objectively. And that's where it's really important to have somebody in your life, whether it's a mentor or somebody whose opinion you
Yes.
really appreciate,
Hmm.
that can
Hmm.
help guide you and can see things in you you can't see in yourself. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, his name was Sam Morello. He was chairman of the fine art department there, uh, and Flint Community Junior College at the time. And I've known Sam till he died about 3 years ago, and he stayed in Michigan, but very close. I'd always go back, and whenever I was back in Flint to see my family, I'd see Sam. We really were. He inspired me, and I respected him, but when he said that, I felt disappointed. Like, you're rejecting me for being a fine artist. This is I'm grooming to be that. And not that my fine art probably was terrible, but there was something he sensed in me that I think it won't fit. It won't be best for you, Michael. And he didn't have a real answer behind that. I mean, a reason, but he just said, I sense that you will enjoy this more. And so he said, here's the school. I got a catalog on it, Art Center College of Design, and I looked at the catalog, and it was applied art, not fine art. again, Art Center had accepted my portfolio before going to the Army. And when I was drafted, I said, I've been drafted, and Art Center said, no problem. Whenever you're finished, contact us and we've got a place for you. So I was there for 2 semesters, and they gave me a full scholarship for the rest of the time, which is a blessing because I didn't have any money. My mother didn't have, I didn't come from a wealthy family. She couldn't afford anything. Whatever I could get, I had to do it on my own.
Is this when you
And
met
so,
Lorster Feidelson?
yes, yeah, he was one of the very first professors in my first semester. Throughout various times, in studying drawing specifically, Harry Carmian, which was his student, uh,
John
uh,
Asaro, I think, as well, right?
John Asaro. I met John Asaro and had a couple classes from him, and we've been lifelong friends. I've known John for many years and go down often, almost annually, down to near San Diego where he lives, Carlsbad, and so outstanding painter, figurative painter. But Vern Wilson, very close. I've
So you
kept
got
up with these people.
all of these people that you're meeting at Art Center, and
Yeah,
so you had to figure that you were in the right place, that illustration was the right direction to go in, and then somehow from that 1975 as an illustrator, and then suddenly you find yourself in 1978 you're working on Lord of the Rings. What happened? How was
yeah,
that jump? How did
yeah.
you jump
No,
from
yeah. Well, here's
illustration
the jump.
with all of these wonderful
Okay,
illustrators like
right.
John Asaro and Lorster
Yeah,
Feidelson,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then suddenly, boom, there you are. Just 3 years later, you're in a completely different
Mhm.
career.
Yeah. Carol called me out of the blue. She said, "Michael, guess where I am?" I said, "Where?" She goes, "I'm working in an animation studio." I said, "What?" And I'd already been an illustrator for 2 or 3 years, and she said, "There, this is Ralph Bakshi's in LA now, and he's doing Lord of the Rings, and they're looking for people that can draw and paint." And I said, "Wow." She goes, "You've got to come here." And she said, "Think about it. Are you really enjoying yourself as an illustrator?" I said, "Sure, I'm not." She said, "You can draw and paint every day, all day long, Michael." And so I said, that's it. So, basically I was still an illustrator for a number of more years because I had clients, and I did that at night and whatever. But I went with Ralph Bakshi. And the old saying about Ralph Bakshi is that he's known for hiring you, firing you, and rehiring you in the same day. He
Yeah,
had a real attitude.
yeah. I,
So
I heard
grumpy old guy.
that he was quite volatile, but he was sort of like in that old school of,
Yeah,
and that's where, yeah, there's some
yeah.
crazy stories about Ralph Bakshi.
Well, Marcelo, I didn't know what I was doing there. I mean, I'd never worked for an animation, so I was just trying to draw. I was a layout. I was trying to draw a layout, and my whole experience with illustration was my heroes in illustration were Bob Peak, Mark English, you know, the illustrators that were current of the time, and they were doing predominantly a montage, so they had very little depth, or certainly not deep space. And so I understood deep space, I understood the concept, but when I had to just sit down and draw deep space, I was already. I mean, I right after Backsheet, there was nothing around with regard to, still Disney was still nowhere. And so I went over to Filmation Studios, worked on He-Man Masters of the Universe, She-Ra, Fat Albert, and a number of projects for about 3 years. And it was 3 or 4 years. And it was there, I was a layout artist. Now that meant had to really get in there and understand perspective and draw deep space. And I'll use all the deep space cues. And I remember the first day, Sharon Forward. Do you know Sharon
Yeah,
Forward?
I know.
Okay. Well, uh, uh, so I was in a room with about 3 other people. I remember this very clearly. I'm in a rolling chair with wheels on it, and I'm so frustrated because I can't break into that deep space. I understand it, but I can't do it because my mind was so conditioned to flat design that, you know, it was tooled. It was already retooled to think that limited space, flat or limited space. montage. And so I remember pushing myself back from this a table, my drawing table, and I said out loud, I said, "Bob Peak couldn't do this." And you know, I thought about it. Bob Peak couldn't do that. He had a career of doing what he does.
Yeah.
Now he understood deep space, but I'm sure because of the condition, your mind has so conditioned to do something. You just sit down and draw a beautiful deep space drawing. It's not practical. It doesn't happen that way. You have to work it, work it, work it. And then we had to retool your mind to be able to do that.
Did you have
And
a
so I have,
or did you have like
oh, I mean,
a mentor that helped you with that? Or was there somebody's artwork that you looked up to? Or what was that like I knew that you were always trying to train yourself and get yourself to the next level. At this point here, you know, you've just gotten into animation. You're trying to break out of your illustration framework.
yeah,
What
right.
got you out of that?
Well, I mean, it was He-Man Master of the Universe. I mean, they had to have those layouts. So I had to eventually learn it, right? And one of my mentors there was Lorenzo Martinez. You
Yes,
know Lorenzo?
very
Yeah,
well
he
known in the industry.
funny guy, absolutely funny guy. You know, his space always had a million different small toys in it. Every break, every lunch, he'd go out to a thrift store and buy a toy, bring it back, and they were not so bad that you had to like kind of tightly move into his space, his little booth, right? And and it was all enclosed with all these toys. And sometimes everything would fall, you know. I mean, crazy guy, absolutely crazy guy. But he had some experience in layout, and uh, and he's a great draftsman. And he was I was in his team, and so he basically mentored me in that. Uh, so I was with that for a few years, and then I had the opportunity of going. My next step would be uh, to Bagdasarian Studios on a Chipmunk World Adventure. So I was a layout artist on that with more experience now in layout. And layouts, pretty hard. You got scenes you have to lay out. It's laborious work, but and you try to make it as beautiful as you can. And so after that, uh, Disney was just now beginning to, the engine was moving now. The train was on its track, and they decided to open Disney Television Animation, a whole new uh, part of the studio. And they had one project, DuckTales, and now they were doing Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. And I came in at that very time and started there. And like I said, those shows and the amount of drawing I did, there was, these scripts had a lot of work to be done. I mean, we only had 2.5 weeks to get, you know, whatever episode and how many, depending on the script and how many locations they were bouncing around to. And so uh, uh, now I had to conceive out of my own head because again, I didn't have the internet even then. I had, all I had was an opportunity of having my own reference, or I go to a library. I would go to a library or go downtown library, research. It was my own mental library. And again, that's why as artists, the younger you are, if you just have a very strong uh, ability to observe everything at every angle, be able to draw it if you can. At Art Center, we had some classes where you had to draw at various angles, any object. And, that taught you how to observe things. And so when I was, working on Disney television animation on those projects, there would be things that I had to add into those locations that I had to now use this. What does a hammer look like? A lot of people probably can't draw the handle of a hammer. It's designed where it doesn't slip from your hand,
Yeah.
right? There's a unique beauty about that, or an axe, and the head of an axe, or a head of a hammer. All these things, if somehow I started having to force this memory to re-engage with all of my life experience. I know what things look like, and if I wasn't quite sure, I got a general sense of it. And so, and a lot of drawing is just out of your mind. You know things, you know what things are and how they're built because you understand the 3D of it. And so, as much as any other, as much as any reference source, that was primarily, I use that as much as anything. So, and I would encourage anyone to start, you know, using their mind, what they understand about reality.
Yeah.
You've looked at it all your life. You've looked
One,
at stuff all your life. Yeah.
yeah, one of the things I found out was that if I could draw it at least once, then my mind could retain it. So
Yes.
my
Right.
sketchbook was all about like whatever it is I found, whether I found,
Yeah.
let's say, like a spacesuit or I found, like you said, an axe or something. I would always try to draw it in my sketchbook because if I could draw it once, then it was a way that I could commit it to my mental library and then I could have
That's
the
very.
for it.
I've never heard that. That's very smart. The way you put that. By we see it all the time. We think we understand it, but until you start drawing that, you wonder. I don't know this as much as I've always thought I understand this. So,
Yeah.
but once you can draw it and commit to that, then it's it burns into your brain a lot clearer, and it's a good resource for you.
So this would have been in the early or the late 1970s, and this is the early 1980s. And I'm just going to go through a list of some of these shows. It really is
Okay,
incredible. Your roster of work that you did is incredible.
and that's not to include both of us. It's not to include a lot of smaller jobs that you wouldn't have,
That,
on
that's right.
just a lot of work over the years. I could show you work that no one's ever seen. I mean that really. So I would never, I don't necessarily put that
Just
on,
the film.
but they were always quality. I always did everything as good as I could make to do it.
Yeah,
So
and then this is the filmography I'm looking at. So there's the Lord of the Rings that you did in '78. There was Fat Albert, He-Man, and She-Ra. Then it was He-Man, Masters of the Universe, Ghostbusters, Chipmunk Adventure. There's Pinocchio, Emperor of the Night, Brave Star, Tailspin. Tailspin, that was a huge success. And that helped. I think a lot of artists, I'm sure, reach out to you that was probably their favorite animation because it was so popular.
yeah, it
Then you
was.
worked on the Little Mermaid series. Then it
Yeah.
was Goof Troop, Bonkers, Aladdin, the Goofy movie. Again, that's another classic. People love that film. There's Quest, and then you
Hey,
co-directed.
wait, let me stop you one second.
Yes.
Let me stop 1 second. Uh, I have to mention this because on Goof Troop, now Goof Troop has he lives in a small town, and I was the principal designer of that before the episode started. Then we brought on some help to help us move through those episodes. But I was the principal designer on that, and they call the town Spoonerville because from Goof Troop, Goofy and Mac live in Spoonerville, and I designed. Remember, I came from a small, somewhere in that history of mine. I came from a small town for 10 years in southeast Missouri, which was 100 miles from Memphis, north of Memphis. I saw Elvis Presley at the Mid South Fair in 1957 when he was first starting. So I was raised in a small 10,000 people hometown in the middle of the Boot Hill in Missouri. And so when I had to design this world, his town, I made a list of all the things I remember being in that small town. And so I did that. And it's part of the Disney documentation, Disney history. That's they've acknowledged that in some literature and stuff. It's really fun. So Spoonerville is where he lived. Okay,
And
so go on.
Spoonerville, it is based on your experience.
Yeah, very
It,
much so. Yeah,
that is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And then so then you were a co-director on Quest for Camelot.
yeah, with Carol Police.
That's wonderful. Then it was Gargoyles in 1995, Quack Pack, Veggie Tales in well, actually, we'll stop there. So it goes all the way up to Quack Pack, and so you have this tremendous, you know, filmography of animated series, and you've got some films you're working on.
Yeah,
And then an earthquake happens in the industry. as the industry, the 2D animation industry begins to implode and it starts to crash and burn, and 2D animation essentially is going to go away, especially as sort of like a mainstay in animation, and it was going to be replaced. And imagine that, there's a lot of people right now, a lot of young people that they're looking at at new technologies that might be really scary. Well, you and I, we lived through that,
Yeah,
because
right.
we trained ourselves to work in 2D animation,
Mhm,
having all
mhm.
that experience. And then suddenly the entire game shifted. Talk to us a little bit about that experience.
Well, that shifting into 3D animation, I think, was the big technological shift. It had been for decades. The history of animation was traditional animation, right?
Since Gertie the Dinosaur.
Uh, I'd already gotten into feature animation at Disney. Okay, I left Warner Brothers, went to Disney Feature, and I even worked on early on to Shrek. Did some work on Shrek. Bill Perkins was art directing for a little bit. I mean, they that Shrek moved through about 4 or 5 different directors. It went all over the place. Ended up going north to finishing it. I mean, so anyone that had anything to do with it had an opportunity to at least touch it. But most people's name never got on the credits, and which is ridiculous because they know accounting knows every dime that's spent and what person does on that film. So, but nevertheless, at Disney Feature, I had still traditionally had the opportunity to participate in Quest for Camelot, which my emphasis more, what I did was when it was Kingdom of the Sun. And by the time it moved into uh, Mark Dindal's more comedic into feature into Quest for Camel, I mean, in for Emperor's New Groove, they wanted me to come on to Treasure Planet. So I did that, and I think some of my best work was Treasure Planet, and then finally Lilo and Stitch. But it was there that I was able still to draw traditionally, and it was on. I guess it was on uh, Treasure Planet that some of those elements became 3D animated, and I had designed. One of my greatest privileges, I designed the spaceport, the Crescentia spaceport, and all the drawings I did that never made it into the film in terms of what I had envisioned. And because they moved it, they built that in 3D animation, and they had no, they were incapable of building such a complex uh, uh, complexity of, that my design had. So they really stripped it down. When I saw it in the movie theater, when I saw it, I go, "What? This is not it."
Yeah.
It was just horrible. So yeah, so that was the first, you
Yeah, because
know,
the technology really was limited. It didn't
yeah,
have
of
sort of,
course,
flexibility that it has nowadays.
yeah, of
Yeah, so
course.
you worked on this is at Disney. It was the Goofy movie, and actually you went to France for that.
Well, that was financed not through feature animation, through Disney Television
Yeah.
Animation. It was their first feature film. They had done other directed videos, but this is a feature film. And so, yeah, spent a year with my wife and my son in Paris. A great opportunity. I was ahead of the layout there, and came back. And then I thought my time with Disney TV is over. And then Warner Brothers created a feature studio because they were seeing how feature studios were making big money now. So they created their own, and was wooed along with Carol and a lot of other people, wooed to Warner Brothers feature animation, and they were paying a whole lot more anyway. So with their, I didn't. Carol and I did not work through the entire production. And I should say that I was on Lilo and Stitch, did a period of time there, and then out of the
That
blue,
that might be one of the first projects that, well, no, because we both
where
worked.
we met, where we really
Yeah,
really worked together at some
Kingdom of the
point.
Sun,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, would have been maybe perhaps that was one of the first ones where we
Oh,
shared a credit on that one. But the first time I remember hearing your name was when Paul Felix left Deke Entertainment and he went over to Disney Television and he started working with you. Do you remember what project that was?
Well, it must have been maybe Tailspin at the time. Tailspin, possibly Tailspin.
Yeah.
He came over, you could see enormous potential,
Yeah,
but
I remember the first time he mentioned you that he mentioned you in really high esteem, and then it was almost like a mentor that someone that was able to get his work to the next level. And I remember and that's the first time I heard your name, and I remember thinking that I hope at some point I get a chance to work with you. And then so here we were, so this
can
would
I
have
just say one thing about about Paul Felix? I said, and I said this to him face to face a number of times, jokingly. But when I was working with, no, when he became the Paul Felix at Disney feature, I we were talking once, and I said, Paul draws like a hot knife against butter. I draw like a jackhammer against concrete. I gotta work it out. I gotta work it out. I gotta work it out. I gotta work redraw. I mean, that's just how we are. We're different. Now he's a lot better than I would ever dream. I would ever even be bold enough to say. Honestly, he is outstanding, as you are. I think you're head and shoulders probably above me in a lot of ways, and so you have, the beauty of your work seems very easy to create. Again, you've seen me work. We work together. I have to rework a lot. I find but I eventually arrive at, I think, a rather beautiful drawing and successful drawing. But it's not as easy for me. It never has been. And so there you go. That's how I get all my pencil mileage.
So here we
Well,
go. Now
well,
the
move on.
Now the industry starts to change.
Yeah.
This earthquake happens, and the industry, which started with Gertie the dinosaur, going all the way up through Tarzan and 2D animation, and then suddenly all of this just sort of falls off a precipice. And I imagine there was probably a point where you had to figure out what you were going to do, and I think that was right around the same time that you ended up going over to VeggieTales.
Well, this is how that happened. So I was on Lilo and Stitch. Phil Vischer calls me early in 1999, out of the blue, and he said, "Michael," uh, and I never have in my history with him, never did find out how he got my name and number. But he called me. He said, "I'm coming out next week, and I'm going to be in LA, and I'd like to take you to dinner. I'd like to ask you a few things." And so, okay, we'll do that. So the dinner arrives that week, and I assume he's probably going to ask me to work for Disney. I'm at Disney Feature Animation. Come on, I mean, you could ask me that, but he did. Point blank after dinner, he said, "Would you consider? Would you, Michael? I'm going to ask you. Would you pray about coming to Chicago and helping me build a very successful direct-to-DVD property into a feature film studio?" And when he said it, I thought, oh gosh, please don't. And he said, would you pray about it? And so I barely squeaked through a little bit of a lie. I said, yeah, yeah, I'll pray for it. Yeah, I'll pray for it. Never really intended to pray for it. Well, a week later, he calls and he said, Michael, all I'm asking is, will you pray about it? It took 6 more months. Phil calling me occasionally and say, Phil, I'm asking God for confirmation. And I tell you, only He can give that. You can't convince me to come. I will not come unless God moves. And so that whole story is a divine encounter of God in our lives. And so it's a profound testimony, but I can't, it's a little too long to give here. So we'll move on. They made me a vice president. And it's like, whoa, I don't, that's not me as a person.
Yeah.
And I think it was my wife who initiated that. Ask, go big, Michael. Ask for ask for it all. They want you, Michael. And they want you to be a critical part of that studio. And I thought, oh, I don't know. I'm just, I'm a laborer, man. I mean, I'm good at, I want to be. And so she said, Michael, you need to think bigger of yourself. Okay. So uh, she actually spoke up, I think Michael needs to be, so they said, okay, we'll make you vice president
that actually goes to another part of the conversation
Yeah,
that we were talking about earlier, that you need somebody on the outside that you trust to see
yeah,
things, a potential in you that you don't
yeah,
see in yourself.
sure,
And that's how
sure.
important it is that when you do find the life partner, that that life partner not only can, build you up and support you, but then can also see things, a potential in you that you can't see in yourself.
Right. It was intimidating for me to have that title. I said, make me director of visual development." They wanted me to take all the visual development from story through layout, through story, through concept and layout, unite them and work them through the process of working through those, and before it goes to production. So they wanted me to be over that, and I did, and I insisted that I come there for artist education as well. Now, as it got busy, really busy, that artist education kind of like dwindled down and died almost. But that was my passion to be there for that reason as well. So they had a lot of beautiful, talented people.
And then later on, that there was some, after a series of
Yeah,
bad decisions
yeah, of
and
course.
things that
Yeah,
sort of fell apart over there.
yeah, yeah. Right, right. Phil had, he'll tell you that in the book he wrote about it, made some very bad decisions. And pride was a part of that. The saying, the biblical word that pride cometh before a fall. He believes that because that was part of his journey, and it was all taken away. He didn't have anything, uh, and so uh, we were there after 5 years. Went there late 1999. In 2004, uh, this has happened. So I thought, I guess we moved back to LA, and God very clearly said to Beverly and I, "Stay put." God, I was arguing, God, you can't do this. There's nothing here for me. I mean, the business is out there. Stay put. And again, that's part of another story too. But we were there for a full 14 years. And it was during that time, my mother's living in Michigan. It was 2004 when the company went into bankruptcy. 2008, we learned that my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Immediately, we knew God had said, "Stay put," because we needed to be near my mother, close, 5 hours away. We were able to get over there a lot during those years. And she died in 2012. And it was at that time when we were leaving her funeral, Bevy and I looked at one another in the car heading back to Chicago. And we both almost simultaneously said, I sense our season, the season in Chicago has come to an end. And so that's when we started looking for other work. And so I thought, I'm going to go to LA and just see if I can pick up some freelance. When I stepped in, I got an appointment with you at Sony. I got an appointment at Disney Feature and at DreamWorks.
I,
3 day, 3 days.
couldn't believe it. It was so, when you reached out and I spoke to you on the phone and that you were coming in like, yes. And I wanted to make sure that we got a chance to meet with you right off the bat because I didn't want you going to any other studio. Because I was itching. I was itching to have to work with you, for that opportunity to work with you.
Yeah.
And I thought this was a fantastic opportunity, and we managed to make that happen.
Well, you walked me through. We
That's
knocked on a door, and who answers the door? You remember?
He's Justin Thompson.
Justin Thompson. And door opens, and you said, "Hi, Justin." And I'm standing at the door with you. "Hi, Justin. Do you know Michael Spooner?" And he said, "Yes, I know Michael Spooner." I said, "How do you know? I don't know you. How does that work?" He goes, "I was at Disney TV Animation for about 3 or 4 months. I was on another floor. I never had the opportunity of seeing you." But he said something that was so wonderful. He said, "Michael, to this day, I still have copies of some of your works." And
Yeah.
I just thought, how wonderful. And he looks at me, and I've got a little portfolio here, and he goes, uh, "Are you looking for work?" "No, no, no." He said, "Is that a portfolio?" I said, "Yeah." I handed it to him, and he leans over and he's flipping through it, and he's recognizing some of this work. He goes, and halfway through the portfolio, he just turns his head. He goes, as he's leaning over, "Are you looking for work?" And I said, "Yes, Justin, I am." He goes, "Are you available? Can you start today?" And I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
So he walked me over to Gendy Tartakovsky, and they were working on a little bit on Popeye. And Gendy said, if you think he's the guy, that if you want to hire him, hire him. And so, before I left the studio, Janet Green,
And a day.
Janet Day, called me, and I knew Janet from other. I, I I I recruited with her some at Big Idea. We went around the country, and so Janet called me. She said, "Michael Spooner, they want you." I said, "Yeah, they offered me a job." She said, and so I immediately took it, and so went home. They said, "You can go home for 30 days, but we want you in the studio after 30 days."
Yeah.
And so Beverly had to sell the home and all of that, prepare it and sell it, and come out here on their own. And God has always been good, always been good.
So I definitely understand what
Yeah,
you mean about that. There's a peace that washes over you, and God's been very
mhm,
good, and God
sure.
has there, not to say that there haven't been difficult times
Or fear rising up. I
or
mean, we
fear
struggle with fear,
rising. Yeah,
but where do you lay that fear? Right
yeah,
before God.
exactly. But where
You-
where do you
Yeah,
put that fear? And then
yeah,
there's
exactly.
that aspect where despite whatever was happening in the industry as things were falling apart, that I had that comfort that God was going to make sure that everything was okay. And yeah, so I
And if
totally
you have history with God, you see how faithful He is.
yes,
Look over the years, He's very, very faithful. He promises to be faithful to those who trust Him.
yeah.
And so, how it's going to happen, I don't know. That's God's working out, But
So you come back to Los Angeles in around 2013, and you work on Popeye. We work on Kazorn together. That's where we got
yeah,
the chance to really just roll up our sleeves and work on something together. You work on Hotel T2, right?
yeah.
That's the one that you worked on. So we both worked on
Mhm.
that one. Then there was Surfs Up 2, the Emoji Movie, The Star. That was a wonderful opportunity
Mhm.
a faith-based project. Then there was the Smurfs, the Lost Village.
We worked very closely on that. You were the principal art
It was the
director on
art
that,
director.
right?
Yeah,
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 right. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
another one of those projects. It was a dream come true to work on because it was so fun. You know,
Oh, yeah.
the animation style that it had, the that really charming look, you were a natural. It made total sense to bring you on board that project.
Very organic, very beautifully
Oh,
organic.
yeah.
It's just,
And leaning into all of that expertise that you and I have picked up after, a lifetime of working in animation, use that skill, so it isn't that we're taking it and we're trying to turn it into something else. No, we're using it in its raw form, that animation. That's why I love that project. I love the way it turned out. The
I did, yeah,
story,
yeah.
struggled, I think, but in terms of
We
the
lost. I mean, I did so many drawings that never made it in the film because the story continued to change. But it was
And then you
just,
work at Warner Brothers. You're working on a Scooby-Doo movie, and then
yeah,
you worked at Skydance Animation, and then
on
I look at
on luck, yeah, on luck,
Unluck, and
and another project that I worked on before I left there. Yeah.
yeah, and then I look
Mhm.
at the totality of your career, um this direction of going into illustration, changing it, going into animation, doing a career in animation, becoming this, the head of a studio, then having all of that fall apart, having to having to come back in. CG animation and having this all other, complete renaissance in your career in CG animation. And I watched that, and now you're doing lectures, you're doing teaching, and imagine you still mentor people.
Yeah,
Is
of course. Yeah.
there like I imagine people are going to be seeing this and they're going to want to reach out to you and talk to you. Where can they find you?
Uh, well, my website is michaelspoonerart.com, and there's a bio there, or about me, and then my email is Spoonerville, SPOONERVILLE one at gmail.com, and then my website is michaelspoonerart.com.
When I look, I see behind you, there's a tremendous amount of work and all of this physical, tangible work. Um,
Yeah.
are you planning on putting a book together or something, or perhaps an art show, or are you planning to sell some of this work?
Well, I need to sell some of it because I can't die with all this just sitting here. My son wouldn't know what to do with it all. Honestly, it would be too much of a burden. I got just too much, right?
Yeah.
And I want to. I'm going to continue to paint, but I have my painting studio over here. Basically, if you can see,
Yeah.
uh, I have to mention that I'm retired now, right? I turned 75 on the 5th of this year, so I'm facing 75, and I said, Beverly, I've got to retire. It's too easy to roll into another project. I just can't do this. Otherwise, I don't do anything for my own work, my own, what I want to be doing in my life. There are only so many years. And so she said, let's do it, Michael. Let's go for it. And it was the hardest decision is to leave the industry, to retire from it. That was my hardest decision to make because it's been a wonderful industry for me. Working with talented people much better than me, surrounded, uh, collaborating with other people. It's just an incredible experience. And so now that I have the time, I've got a lot of stuff that has to get done, and I want to continue. Now I want to re-engage in my painting and see where that goes.
Michael, I want to thank you so much for this interview, for sharing your experience in animation, your wisdom, your knowledge, and also your faith as well. I was wondering, there's going to be a lot of, I would imagine, young people that might be watching this video. What sort of words of encouragement do you have for them?
Well, I'm sure I trust that most of you have a passion for being an artist, and my encouragement would be that you learn that you just continue to practice the solid art of drawing and learning how to design when you draw. Think about design with regard to the full picture. Uh, Everything you draw has a design to it, and sometimes we separate drawing from design. But if you can incorporate them together to make it who you are, you would. Yeah, but that has to be done by experience. You have to draw enough where suddenly it's just you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that inspiring.
Oh, so thank you.
I look forward to seeing what comes next in this next chapter for Michael Spooner.
And I hope I can say I will have a gallery showing of what I've been doing. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Whether anything sells or not really doesn't matter. I want to share what I've been doing.
Yeah.
And some people may look at it and say, "Oh my gosh, I don't like this at all." But I like it. That's what's important to me. So
Thank you so much, Michael.